What's up guys? I'm GamerMD83 and after 4 months, I'm finally going to be reviewing Dragon Age Inquisition. So it goes without saying that I took my time to beat the game, but I also took a lot of time to organize my thoughts because my first playthrough was nearly 300 hours. I wanted to make this more of a review focused on some of my experiences with the key features of the game. As usual, I won't be going into spoilers, but I will be talking about the writing in general and my overall thoughts about how the story was presented. So as a lot of you might know, Dragon Age Inquisition is the third installment in the Dragon Age series that was developed by Bioware and published by EA. It's for the PS4, PS3, Xbox One, Xbox 360, and PC. It's an action RPG set in a medieval fantasy world with single player and multiplayer modes. However, I will not be talking about the multiplayer in this video since I haven't played enough of it, but I will be making a video focused on it later on. So now that the general stuff is out of the way, let me talk a little bit about my first playthrough. So like I said earlier, it took me nearly 300 hours to beat the game, and 100 of those hours was spent in the character creator alone. Ugh. I'm totally kidding. In all honesty, it did take me quite a while to create my first Inquisitor. I didn't even get to play the game the day it came out because I kept restarting and restarting and restarting. For me, I need to feel instant connection with my character because if I don't, that character goes bye-byes. So I went in thinking I was going to be a female dwarf warrior. Nope. Human mage. No. Give the dwarf one more try. Not happening. I wasn't considering the Kunari for a playthrough just yet because for some reason I had that one already placed in my mind for a later playthrough. I was like, I want that one to be specific. Like I want to create a female Kunari, I want to romance Iron Bull. So I wanted to save that one for later because my first playthrough, I really wanted to romance Blackwall. What about an elf? I've never been a fan of the elves.
You humans are all racist.
And when it comes to rogue, the same thing. I do not like rogues. I don't feel it with elves and I don't feel it with rogues. So what ended up feeling just right? A female elf rogue. It was weird. It just felt right. I fell in love with the character. I fell in love with rogue. Shows me. So let me talk a little bit about the character creator. The character creator is kind of limited when it comes to specific aspects of it, but if you spend a lot of time with it, and trust me you will, you can get some pretty cool looking Inquisitors. I really like the amount of control added to specific features of the face and being able to control the inner and outer colors of the iris, but when it came to hair, oh my god. There's one hair option in the mix that is pretty much dead weight. I'm pretty sure there's no Inquisitor in Thedas rocking that sexy do. Or more like, don't. Aside from that, like I said, with time, you can get a decent looking Quizzy. And now with the Black Emporium DLC being added very soon, we'll be able to keep this handsome fellow and just edit his glorious duck face lips post-creation. Oh, and give him that sexy hairdo, of course. Seriously though, don't. When it comes to the classes, as always, you can choose from 3, Mage, Warrior, or Rogue. And each class has 3 specific specializations that you could focus on later on in the game. I fell in love with the classes in this game. Even though they're the same classes as before, they felt a lot more polished this time around. Especially the Rogue Archer. Everything about it immediately got me hooked. The damage, the sound, the bowstrings. And you're the only ranged class that can move while attacking. The only thing I wasn't very happy about when it came to the Archer in particular was that none of the specializations really geared towards Archer or really did anything for the Archer. For example, Assassin was perfect for duelists, Artificer was pretty much like a traps expert, and Tempest, the one I chose, was not really geared towards a ranged build. Some of the elixirs that you would use would even taunt enemies, making them come to you, which is exactly what you don't want as a ranged damage dealer. So the only reason I ended up choosing Tempest was because of the fire elixir. With a feature upgrade, when you use the fire elixir for a given moment, you didn't have any cooldowns for your abilities. So that was useful, but out of an entire tree of a specialization, just having one useful ability was just not cool. I think what would have been a lot better was to completely eliminate Artificer and replace it with a specialization that was geared towards ranged builds. For example, a ranger or a sniper. Because in all honesty, Artificer was a complete waste. Because if you weren't the Artificer, Varric wasn't going to take advantage of those abilities 100%. Because Varric became an Artificer by default. Unless you took control of him every time in order to place traps or whatever. But I never wanted to do it and never even felt the need to do it. But while we're on this topic, let me just say that out of all the Dragon Age games, DAI has been the best at providing a lot of control and purpose to each class. You want to be a defender? You can become a wall. You want to be a damage dealer? You could get your rogue to do over 13k of damage in one hit. Mages could also be great damage dealers, but for me, they made better supporters. They did get rid of the heal spells, which made a lot of people go crazy at first, but I never felt the need for a healing spell. If you organize your party to its fullest potential, your potions were more than enough. And if your 8 starting potions weren't enough, you could even add 4 more to the slot with an Inquisition perk later on. And if that wasn't enough, the best grenade in the game, at least for me, was Healing Mist. If you fully upgraded it, it would give you 3 grenades for each of your party members, and it pretty much was an area of effect healing spell. So when you'd use it, it would heal everyone in your party, including yourself, within range. So that was like adding 3 more potions to your slot, to each character. Plus health regeneration potions. Again, there was no need for healing spells. So getting rid of the healing build, it opened up the doors for different types of mage specializations, which I think were a lot better. Not all of them, but some of them were pretty cool. The Knight Enchanter, I think, is a really strong build, especially when you want to do damage that's not weak and not always sitting in the back. It did end up getting pretty overpowered. I haven't tried the Knight Enchanter personally, but I have heard people saying that they could kill a dragon on their own eventually. Rift Mage was extremely useful. It's such a good specialization for support, especially Pull of the Abyss. It would pull enemies into one area, which would keep things tactically organized in order for the tank to keep threat easier and to keep enemies off the ranged damage dealers. This made it really easy for the ranged damage dealers to just let loose on all the enemies all in one place. It was awesome, and it made things so much easier for area of effect abilities. The Necromancer was my least favorite, which was a shame because I love Dorian. He's like one of my favorite characters, and I would always take him with me. But once he got the Necromancer specialization, I started to see Vivienne, who was a Knight Enchanter, and Solas, who was the Rift Mage, a lot more useful in a fight than Dorian's necromancy. So at first, that was one thing that I really did not like. The fact that your party members had set specializations. You did not have any control over that. This bothered me a lot, specifically with Blackwall, because I wanted to make Blackwall a two-hander, and I wanted to make Cassandra my tank, my sword and shield. Before I knew that the party members had assigned specializations, I was like, I'm gonna make Blackwall a Reaver. But then someone online was like, oh no, Blackwall turns into a champion. And I was like, what? Champion is a perfect specialization for a tanking build, for a defender, and even better if you pair it with a sword and shield. However, I do have to be fair and say that Dragon Age Inquisition made it very easy to mix and match, to create jacks of all trades, to make a two-hander that was a tank. If you made your tank a sword and shield warrior, you did take more advantage of it because of that extra defense that a shield grants, because it was a lot, like plus 30% to front defense or immunity to flanking some shields. So without the shield, and it was if you just had a two-hander sword, if you gave that, if for example, if you became a champion two-hander, you would become a pretty good tank. But if you're a traditionalist like me, where you want to see your two-handers dealing damage and that's it, and your sword and shields defending, this really bothered me, but only at first. Later, I realized why Bioware made this choice. Each party member has a pre-assigned specialization so that the writers had more control over that character's development. Each of these pre-assigned specializations suits the character's background. There's even class and specialization specific banter. Also, it makes sense that Solus is a Rift Mage. It makes sense that Cassandra is a Templar. If you were in control of choosing their specializations, in some cases, it wouldn't really make sense. For example, making Solus into a Necromancer or Cole into an Artificer. And aside from that, the characters even respond to you, depending on what specialization you chose. I loved this. I thought it was brilliant. If you become a Templar, Dorian tells you you smell different. He says Templars smell like lightning strikes because of the lyrium. And if you become a Necromancer, you spark this really interesting conversation with Cassandra about the Mortalitasi because she's Navarran and necromancy is a big thing in Navarra. And what Cullen has to say to you when you go to him about becoming a Templar is just awesome, especially if you're in a romance with him. In previous games, none of this mattered. Your specialization never mattered. I mean, in Dragon Age 2, blood magic was a huge topic of the plot. It was a huge issue in Kirkwall. It was pretty much what sparked a lot of the tension in Kirkwall, in the Kirkwall circle. Yet, when you became a blood mage, nobody seemed to care. Nobody said anything. On the same note, actually becoming a Templar or a Tempest or a Rift Mage, it didn't just happen at the push of a button, as always. It wasn't just like, okay, press A, you're a Templar now. You actually had to go through training, and this training became like a mini side quest that you had to accomplish. And once you accomplished it, then you became that specialization. Choosing a specialization was now weaved into the story, and you even invited 3 trainers in the specific specialization, and it was just awesome because some of these trainers were absolutely hilarious. And not only that, but they also helped you choose because they would tell you, you would go to each trainer and they would tell you what it was about, what a Rift Mage was about, what a Necromancer was about. So it would help you decide what you wanted to be, especially for newcomers to the series. If they didn't, they were like, what the hell's a Templar, or what the hell's a Necromancer? What does it entail? How am I supposed to choose? The trainers were there to tell you what each class was about. This also made it so much more realistic for me because it was really cool to see that even though you're this Inquisitor, you have like this army at your side and you have to save Thetis, you still can be taught new things from experts. You're not this crazy hero that knows everything. You can be taught, and I love that. Out of the 290 hours I played Dragon Age Inquisition, I spent a lot of it crafting. This was one of my favorite features of the game because it gave you even more control when it came to the character you were trying to build. You didn't just have materials to work with, but also different kinds of materials, leather, cloth, and metal, that had particular properties and different tiers depending on how far you were in the game. So it never felt redundant or pointless because you knew that further ahead you were going to get higher tier materials and schematics. I think what crafting benefited the most was how much specific armors and weapons could affect your stats. In previous games, every time you leveled up, you would get a specific amount of skill points that you could distribute among constitution, dexterity, cunning, etc. This feature was completely removed from Dragon Age Inquisition. Before the game was released, a lot of people were concerned that this was going to get rid of a lot of the customization power that the player had to make a specific build feel like a rogue or like a warrior, where you're in control of where you focus your points. But in all honesty, I think the Dragon Age Inquisition system gives you even more control when it comes to your build, and it also urges you to take advantage of the crafting system. So before, you only had 3 points to distribute among your skills every time you leveled up. Now you could use materials and armor that grant you plus 20 cunning or 12% critical chance. And you could do this with armor pieces, weapons, and armor and weapon modifications. And then add in the accessories, you could get your skills up higher than ever before whenever you wanted. There was no more need to wait until you leveled up. When it came to the aesthetics of the armor, it was cool that you had one armor and it would look different on everybody, on different party members, including yourself. But for me personally, some of the armors were pretty dull, especially when it came to warrior. I love when my warriors look menacing, huge, like tanks, cast in metal, sharp edges. As much as I understand that leather was used a lot in medieval times, I wanted there to be a difference, at least when it came to how they looked, when it came to a rogue and a warrior. I mean, rogues, obviously, they're always in leather. But when it comes to warriors, I want them to stand out. Sometimes they almost looked exactly the same. This coat, this leather coat. And don't even get me started on headgear. Hide helmet on at all times. Because, ugh. Now, this is obviously a very individual opinion, but when it comes to the aesthetics of the materials, the leather looked so real to me. So they did an amazing job when it comes to the way that the materials looked like. I would have loved to see something more when it comes to at least the warriors. I would have loved to see them, bigger, kind of like they were in Dragon Age Origins. There were some really cool armor pieces in Dragon Age Origins. So how does this all affect the combat system? Greatly. The combat system in Dragon Age Inquisition is awesome because if you're not into all of this planning and tactics and strategery, it doesn't matter. You can just go into real-time battles and hack and slash your way through. But if you are into more of a RPG combat style, that is also available. By using the tactical camera, you can pause the screen to sneak a look at the battlefield and enemies ahead of you. You can also give each of your party members commands of position or attack. It allows you to hit first, focus your tank on specific enemies, and cast status effects before they even know you're there. So if you take full advantage of TACCAM, you could get through tough fights faster and die a lot less. So you do have a choice of how to go into combat. The only difference is that TACCAM will give you the advantage in a fight. One thing I didn't like about the combat system in Dragon Age Inquisition was that you didn't have a lot of control when it came to your party AI. In Dragon Age 2, I fell in love with the tactics system and how you could pretty much tell each party member how to respond in specific situations. For example, I could have Aveline's first attack always be shield bash on an elite enemy. This would cause the enemy to be stunned for a few seconds. Then in Meryl's tactics menu, I could have it so that when an enemy is stunned, she casts chain lightning. This combo, if performed in sync, can cause immense damage. That's how precise the tactics system was. In DAI, all of this was completely removed. Now you only have a tactics tab and a behaviors tab. In the tactics tab, you can set the frequency of a character's abilities. This was handy, of course, but I would have preferred to have a system where I could tell the AI when to use an ability. This made combos extremely hard to initiate because the party AI didn't know how to take advantage of those windows of opportunity. In the behaviors tab, you could pretty much tell the character AI when to use and not to use a potion, which enemies to target, or which allies to defend, but not in depth like elite, range, mage, etc. Just follow and defend. So if I set Blackwall to follow me, he would always attack the enemy I was attacking, which a lot of times this bothered me so much. The tank needs to stay focused on getting everyone's hate and have them go to him or her. The tank should not be jumping from enemy to enemy. If they already gathered a pile of enemies around them, that's perfect. The damage dealers, the range damage dealers, will get the stragglers. So every time I would be getting a straggler off to the side, like some archer, Blackwall would be handling a bunch of enemies here, and then he'd just run off into the guy that I was attacking, and I was like, also, on the topic of ranged types, mages specifically, there was no way to make them stay ranged. In previous games, you could make their behavior be ranged, and they would stay ranged. In this, you would see. Oh, this was a huge thing for me, where I was like, oh my god, just stay in the back. Solus was always up front, like right next to Blackwall, and I was like. So even though gaining the upper hand was a lot more possible in this game, actually keeping it was slightly diminished because of this limited AI system. Of course, this was mostly evident in long, challenging fights, because if you customized each party member to their fullest potential, a lot of times the fight wouldn't even get a chance to get disorganized. I had fights end almost instantly without ever getting hit because of one-shot kills and status effects that prevented enemies from even moving. Now let's talk about outside features not directly related to combat. The war table and your war council. Not only do you have 9 characters that follow you out in the field and fight with you, but also 3 main advisors. as well as a few other characters that you can talk to a great deal about different things. Your 3 advisors are mainly used as different ways of handling operations on the war table. The war table is pretty much the map of Orlais and Ferelden, and here you are presented with your main quests, some mini side quests where you actually head to areas to find something, but the majority are operations that present to you a situation that is weaved within the storyline and sometimes is even a result from your actions throughout the game. So depending on the way that your Inquisitor is leading the Inquisition, you get to choose from Liliana, who is the spy master, Josephine, who is the diplomat, and Cullen, who is your military commander, to solve these operations in real-time hours and or minutes. I loved doing these operations because they felt different. To progress the story or to even get a piece of story or lore, you didn't always have to go out in the field. You didn't always have to go into like combat or activate side quests. The war table had its own RPG style. It was a written RPG style, and then you just make decisions. If you've played Dragon Age Last Court, it was similar to that. And the outcome of your decision on specific operations or how they were handled would sometimes benefit you, and sometimes they would end in absolute bloodshed. Until I experienced a very bad decision that I had made on the war table, where I never thought it could get that dramatic, I was blown away. I was like, oh my god. A few of them, not all of them, but a few of them were character changing. And I mean by you personally as a player, as like inside here who your character is, and not so much see it manifested, which was specific for the Dalish background if you chose to be an elf. I really wish it had manifested itself in the game, in the character, see how the character reacted to this outcome, but it wasn't. So it was more of an internal thing for the player where you're like, oh my god, this just happened to my character. And other times, some of the operations were absolutely heartfelt, especially for longtime Dragon Age fans that have played the previous games. You would get cameos from previous games, some of them small, where you're like, oh, I think I remember that person. But other times, some of the cameos were major. So I'm glad that they made the war table not only a way of presenting new operations, interesting scenarios to, have you really flesh out the type of Inquisitor that you are, the type of leader that you are. They also used it to incorporate more lore, to answer some questions. Some of the operations had to do with past games, and others even with the books. So for diehard fans, it was awesome to experience this. But even if you weren't a diehard fan, even if you hadn't played the previous games or read the books, they were still very interesting scenarios that were brought to you. Even though you didn't know who these characters were, still interesting operations, still beneficial. They did a great job about explaining things in a way that wasn't repetitive to the fans and not alienating to somebody that has just picked up Dragon Age for the first time. And even though it was just a table, you still had some banter among your war council. You would hear them talking to each other.
I fear for her.
Fear for her, rather than fearing what she will do. You do care.
Judgments. Once in Skyhold, you got a pretty cool opportunity to feel like you were the leader of the Inquisition. Sometimes when you were out on a quest, you were left with the decision of either killing some big baddie or taking them in for a trial at Skyhold. I really like this new feature, and it could have been used to bring a very serious element to the story and your decisions, but in my opinion, it didn't quite live up to its potential. It was more of a tease than anything else. There were very few judgments as a whole already, and only a couple of those really meant something to me. Those few judgments involved defendants that presented legitimate reasons for their actions. I could feel the tension in the air, and sometimes what I had thought would be a simple judgment had me questioning myself afterwards. It was a great system to express the type of ruler you were, so I would have loved to see more of that and less of the lighthearted judgments. Not saying that all the judgments should have been absolutely serious. I did enjoy some of those lighthearted judgments, but since there were so few of them, I would have loved to see more meaningful ones and not just judging a box. When it comes to character interactions, Dragon Age has always been great at making you form relationships. This is one thing I adore about the series, and Dragon Age Inquisition didn't let me down. There were more romance options than ever before, and now those relationships were incorporated into the character development and the story. They weren't just a system. So-and-so is romanceable by all. Take your pick. I definitely understand that a lot of people were furious that, say, Dorian was only romanceable by a male, or that Sarah was a female romance only, or how come we can't have some Vivienne love? She's hot.
Ugh.
Personally, I love the way Bioware made the Dragon Age Inquisition romances. They felt real. I'm not saying that the previous romances didn't feel real, but now you could see why characters felt the way they felt. Iron Bull's beliefs, Iron Bull's way of thinking with the Qun, it makes sense why he would see everyone as equal. And Dorian's personal quest was amazing. It was so heartfelt. It was so real. It was so emotional, raw. The type of stuff that isn't addressed in a lot of games. And BioWare did a really good job about how they addressed it. And not just Dorian, but he's just an example. A lot of the other characters as well. It was amazing to see that type of complexity in a character. So more than ever before, a lot of the things that were presented to you in Dragon Age Inquisition were to support the story or the characters' backgrounds. So I know that a lot of people felt left out because of some of the romance options, but the beauty of this series is that you could always make a new Inquisitor. You want to romance Sarah? Create a female and romance her. A lot of these different choices, and I'm not just talking about plot choices, but even when it comes down to race, class, romance, gender, and even the voice you chose, because you have two voices, male and female, to choose from. British accent and American accent for male and female. Even though the lines are exactly the same, no matter what voice you choose, the lines are exactly the same. But the delivery was unique to that voice. My first playthrough was a female, and I chose the British accent. And my second playthrough, I chose a male, and I chose the American accent. They made that Inquisitor feel real, no matter which one you chose. They all did an amazing job. And when it comes to your gender, usually your gender has nothing to do with the story or anything. It doesn't change anything. And as much as that's true here, you did see a difference, because in my first playthrough, I romanced Blackwall as a female, and in my second playthrough, I was a male. And my first playthrough, I really loved Blackwall. I was like, oh, he's so sweet and he's so cute. But as a male, he felt different to me. And it was because the flirty aspect of Blackwall was taken out. Those little details blew my mind, because I was like, it makes it feel different, no matter if you just beat it. I hadn't even beaten Dragon Age Inquisition when I started my second playthrough. That's how fresh it feels. I know so many people were playing multiple playthroughs when they were playing their own playthrough, because it doesn't feel like it's repetitive. As much as some parts do, there's so much diversity when it comes to the way that Dragon Age Inquisition plays out. And even when it comes to the plot choices, I don't think there has ever been a time where the different decisions that you make when it comes to the plot, especially the major ones, I never really felt too much of a difference. You know, it was like a slight difference here and there, but now it was almost a whole new path. For a Dragon Age game, I found it absolutely amazing that they did that. It gives the game so much replayability for so many different reasons. But again, it's not like you could play the game over and over and it's always different. No, I'm just saying the experience is going to be, a lot of the things you're going to be like, oh, I didn't see this before, or oh, that sounded different, or oh, this person is reacting different to me. When it comes to the character interactions, one thing that I didn't really like was the approval and disapproval system. The type of player that I am when it comes to these games, I worry a lot about that kind of thing, because I'm like, oh, I don't want them to hate me, especially the characters that I really like, especially my romance. I romanced Blackwall my first time around. Whenever I would see Blackwall disapproves, I'd be like, oh no. In cases where you really may have to do some bad things, where you really have to do something that they really don't like, they will leave. So I've always worried about that. Whenever I see so-and-so disapproves, I'm and there's really no way of getting everyone to approve, especially in decisions, big decisions that you make. You will see a list of people that approve and don't approve, and it's hard to get everyone to approve. You will always get someone that disapproves, and it's just like, oh. So that's just me. I pay attention to that in my first playthrough. Second playthrough, I'm like, whatever. And I heard it takes a lot for them to leave. In my opinion, the better system is from Dragon Age 2, the friendship and rivalry system. I thought that was more realistic, where you could have a friendship with somebody, or you could have a rivalry and they won't leave because this is really important. What you're doing is more important than them being pissed off at you, where they're like, okay, fine, I don't like this person, but this is something big that I have to do. You know, I believe in this cause. I need to be a part of it. You know, I always like that, where it's like, they weren't just like, fine, I'm leaving. It was more of like an agreement where it's like, you know what, I don't like you that much, but I'm going to put up with you. And you could even have a rivalry with your romance. You would get different scenes, like the same situations, but different ways of them telling you things, whether you were a friend or a rival. So in my opinion, I would have liked to see that kind of system in Dragon Age Inquisition more than the whole approve and disapprove. While we're on the subject, I need to talk about banter. Banter has always been a huge thing when it comes to Dragon Age. At first, a lot of people thought banter in Dragon Age Inquisition was glitched, because some people were telling me, they were like, I haven't experienced any banter. I don't know 100% if it was glitched. Bioware confirmed that this was not a glitch, and in fact a different system. In previous games, banter was triggered in specific locations. So for example, every time you pass that bridge, you'd get a banter, and then you leave the area, come back, pass that bridge again, and you get a different banter. Now it happened randomly. I spent many hours wandering the wilderness in all locations of the game, so I pretty much figured out how this new banter system works. Banter frequency now depended on which party members were in your party. If you want a chatty party, put Dorian in it. But the interesting thing was that it didn't just happen with whoever, like put Dorian and he'll chat up everyone. No, it was only specific people. For instance, a very chatty party would be Iron Bull and Dorian, or Sarah and Dorian, Blackwall and Dorian. Another thing was that location mattered. Forget about expecting banter in the Western approach. But it kind of makes sense to me because it was this open desert, it was hot, it was desolate. The last thing on people's minds would be to be chatting people up. In other locations, you would get banter here and there every now and then, sometimes more than others. But in Western approach, it was just like this sudden stop. Nobody wants to be talking in a place like that. And the really interesting thing was that in the Hissing Wastes, another desolate desert, but now in the night, where it's colder, there was rarely any banter there also, but you would get individual comments, like someone's talking about how cold it was, or someone talking about how vast it was, or someone talking about how you couldn't see anything for miles. I thought that was really cool. You also had a higher chance of triggering banter in towns or around camps. And there was no banter while riding a mount. I didn't really like this because it was definitely one of the main reasons why I preferred to be on foot. Because the banter is a huge thing in the series. It's a huge part of the series, a huge part of the characters. A lot of that banter is just amazing writing. You just don't want to miss it. Especially your first playthrough. Because my second playthrough, I'm on my mount a lot. So I could see how this system could really bother someone that's not spending hours in specific locations. You have to be running around for quite a while to experience a lot of it. So it didn't bother me too much, but I do prefer the trigger points much more. One of my favorite aspects of Dragon Age Inquisition was the open world. And I say open world in quotes because in technical terms, it's more of a semi-open world. You could explore more than enough on a map, but you can't go absolutely everywhere. But when it comes to the series, the world did open up immensely. There was a variety of different environments, different ecosystems, different weather systems. Every place felt different. Each map had its own activities, its own flora and fauna, its own minerals, and this diversity always gave you a reason to go back. And again, like I said earlier, that if you don't like to grind like this, there's a lot of opportunity in the war table where your advisors will get materials for you, and even some Inquisition perks where you level up your Inquisition. Some of them will give you a bunch of materials. It would be beneficial if you went and looked for some, at least some. And those operations on the war table are always available, and they take just a few minutes to complete. So you could literally keep doing them, and stack up on the materials. But the option is there. And then the dragons. Each location had its own dragon, right? Not all of them, but most of the major locations had its own dragon. There were 10 major high dragons that you had to defeat. Well, you didn't have to. If you didn't want to, you didn't have to. You did get an achievement if you killed all 10. Not only were the dragons epic fights, because they were epic. The dragon was the only thing that ever really killed me, like game over style. And every time you died, you just went back in there. It was like, man, I know I could kill this thing. I have to kill this thing. I killed my first dragon at level 10. It was the Hinterlands dragon. I think 2 or 3 levels higher than I was. It took me, I think, like 5 times to kill it. But when I killed it, I was so happy. I felt like I could take on the world. They did such a good job with the dragon fights. They made them epic, and the music would just start amping up. Like when you would be running into the dragon's nest, the music started to get louder and louder, and it started to get more heroic, and you're just like, I could do this. You felt like such a bamf. So all of this is why I took so long playing the game. So that's pretty much my review of Dragon Age Inquisition. I definitely recommend this game. It's a beautiful game to look at and so much fun. You could literally play it for hours and hours if you really just take a moment to appreciate everything it has to offer. For fans of the series and Bioware games, it goes without saying that this is a must. It's a lot of fun, and it adds a lot to the lore, and as much as it answers a lot of questions, it also leaves a lot of questions unanswered, and it presents new questions, which is something that I've always loved about Dragon Age. I don't always want to know the answer to everything. That little mystery is always a good thing, and I think Dragon Age Inquisition did a really good job about that. Like I said previously, they do a really good job about explaining past occurrences, things that are important for the story in Dragon Age Inquisition that not everyone knows about, especially when it comes to the books, when it comes to the comics. They throw in little hints here and there in dialogues. They don't shove it in your face where it almost feels like encyclopedic. But what this game does very well is that it's very welcoming. It does have some pretty intricate systems, but with time you do get the hang of it. And again, the best part is that nothing is forced on you. There's almost always a choice as to how you go into a fight, as to whether you want to spend time on crafting, whether you want to spend time exploring, or whether you just want to go and see the actual main quest. You have that choice. There have been people that have played for over 300 hours, and others that have beaten the game in about 40 hours, even 30 hours. So that goes to show the diversity when it comes to the choice that Bioware gives the player in not only the type of Inquisitor that you're playing, the type of story that you're creating, but also in how you play the game. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys also get lost in the world of Dragon Age Inquisition.